Collision of Worlds. Olivia Nakamura checked her GPS again as her rental car climbed the narrow coastal road. The lighthouse keeper's cottage should be just ahead, promising the solitude she desperately needed. 3 years of researching coral bleaching had culminated in a devastating report that her foundation had buried for political reasons. She needed space to decide her next move, away from the politics and disappointment. The first fat raindrops splattered against her windshield as the white lighthouse came into view, a solitary sentinel against the darkening sky. The cottage beside it looked exactly as advertised: weathered stone walls, blue shutters, and blessed isolation. No neighbors for miles, just the rhythmic crash of waves against the cliffs below. Perfect, Olivia whispered, feeling the tension. In her shoulders ease slightly. 3 days of silence, sea air, and sorting through her thoughts was exactly what she needed. She hurried through the intensifying rain to the door, fumbling with the lockbox to retrieve the key. Inside, the cottage was everything she'd hoped for. Rustic wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and windows overlooking the churning ocean. She'd just set down her bag when she heard an engine outside. Frowning, Olivia peered through the rain-streaked window. A sleek black SUV had pulled up beside her modest rental. No one else was supposed to be here. She'd specifically booked the entire property. The cottage door swung open and a man stepped in, bringing a gust of wind and rain. Tall, with olive skin and closely cropped dark hair threaded with silver. At the temples, he carried a laptop bag and wheeled suitcase. His charcoal coat was expensive, his movements efficient. He stopped abruptly when he saw her. "I think you have the wrong cottage," Olivia said, crossing her arms. The man checked his phone. "Lighthouse Point Cottage? Booked through Coast Haven Rentals?" Yes, but I booked it months ago." "As did I." He set down his bag and extended a hand. "Rafiq Nassar." Olivia didn't take it. "There's been a mistake. I have confirmation emails." "As do I." His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't place. "Perhaps we should call the rental agency." 5 frustrating minutes on speakerphone confirmed their worst fears. A system glitch had double-booked the property. Worse, the storm that had been threatening all day was now officially a weather emergency. "I'm afraid all roads to and from the peninsula will be closed until the storm passes," the apologetic rental agent explained. "The authorities have already set up blockades. We can offer a full refund to one of you, but relocation isn't possible tonight." After the call ended, Olivia and Rafiq stood in uncomfortable silence, the wind howling outside as if mocking their predicament. "I'm not leaving," Olivia said firmly. "I need this time away." Something in Rafiq's expression shifted. Not anger, but a weariness she recognized all too well. "Neither am I. I have a deadline that won't wait for better weather." Lightning flashed, illuminating the cottage in stark white before plunging it back into gray shadows. The subsequent thunder was immediate and deafening. "The cottage has 2 bedrooms, Rafiq observed quietly. "It seems we're both stuck here, Dr. Nakamura." At her surprised look, he added, "Your name was on the booking confirmation." Olivia studied him. The careful distance he maintained, the shadows under his eyes, the way he surveyed the room like someone mapping escape routes. Whoever Rafiq Nassar was, he seemed as desperate for solitude as she was. "Fine," she conceded. "But this doesn't mean we have to interact. You take the east bedroom, I'll take the west. The common areas we use on a schedule." Rafiq nodded once, something almost like relief crossing his face. "Agreed. I assure you, Dr. Nakamura, I have no interest in company either." Outside, the storm unleashed its full fury, sealing them into their accidental cohabitation. Neither could possibly know that the lighthouse wasn't the only thing about to weather a powerful storm. Cold shoulders, warm hearth morning arrived with no improvement in the weather. Olivia woke to the persistent drumming of rain against her window and the distant crash of waves. For a blissful moment she forgot about her unexpected housemate, until the aroma of coffee drifted under her door. She found Rafiq in the kitchen, his back to her as he stood at the window watching the storm. A steaming mug sat on the counter beside a French press. "I made enough for 2, he said without turning. "I hope that's acceptable." "Thank you," Olivia replied stiffly, pouring herself a cup. The coffee was rich and perfectly brewed. She leaned against the opposite counter, maintaining as much distance as the small kitchen allowed. Have you checked the road conditions? Still closed. The storm is expected to intensify again this afternoon. He finally turned, his expression carefully neutral. I've proposed a schedule. He nodded toward a notepad on the table where he'd written out hourly blocks for kitchen, living room, and bathroom use. Olivia raised an eyebrow. A bit excessive, don't you think? I value my privacy. I assumed you felt the same. She studied the meticulous handwriting. Fine, but I need the kitchen at dinner, not lunch. I brought ingredients for specific meals. Rafik adjusted the schedule without argument. An awkward silence settled between them as they sipped their coffee, the only sounds the ticking of an old clock and the howling wind. What kind of deadline requires isolation in a lighthouse? Olivia finally asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Rafik hesitated. I'm finishing a book. You're a writer? Among other things. His tone discouraged further questions. True to their agreement, they spent the morning avoiding each other. Olivia set up her laptop at the small desk in her bedroom, reviewing research, data she'd secretly copied before leaving. Meanwhile, Rafik worked silently in the living room, the occasional tapping of his keyboard barely audible through her closed door. By afternoon, the storm had intensified as predicted. The electricity flickered ominously several times, and the temperature in the cottage began to drop. During her scheduled time in the living room, Olivia examined the fireplace. It hasn't been used in years, Rafik commented, appearing in the doorway. There's wood stacked outside, but it's likely too wet now. There's a covered storage area on the east side, Olivia countered. I noticed it when we arrived. Some of that wood might still be dry. Without waiting for a response, she pulled on her raincoat and boots. The wind nearly knocked her over when she stepped outside, the short walk to the wood storage leaving her drenched despite her protective gear. She was struggling to carry an armful of logs when suddenly the weight lessened. Rafik had followed her out and silently took half the burden, his own coat rapidly darkening with rain. Back inside, they worked without speaking, Olivia crumpling newspaper and arranging kindling while Rafik examined the chimney flue. When he reached around her to adjust a log, their hands briefly touched. Both pulled away quickly. Sorry, they said in unison, then looked away, embarrassed. The first attempt to light the fire failed, smoke billowing into the room. Rafik opened a window despite the cold, while Olivia adjusted the damper. Their second attempt caught. Flames, flickering tentatively, then growing stronger. You've done this before, Rafik observed. Field research often means rustic accommodations, Olivia replied, warming her hands. What about you? You don't seem like someone who regularly builds fires. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My life wasn't always... He gestured vaguely, at himself, his expensive watch glinting in the firelight. I grew up in southern Lebanon. Power outages were common. It was the first personal detail he'd volunteered, and Olivia found herself wanting to know more. Instead, she checked her watch and stood. It's your scheduled time for the living room now. The schedule seems rather pointless with both of us here, Rafik said, and it's the warmest spot in the cottage. As if to emphasize his point, the lights flickered again, then went out completely. The fire cast dancing shadows across the walls, suddenly their only source of light and heat. Olivia sank back down. I guess we're sharing now. They sat in silence as darkness fell outside, the wind rattling the windows. The fire needed regular tending, which gave them both something to focus on besides each other. Yet Olivia found herself stealing glances at Rafik as he stared into the flames, his profile strong against the firelight, his expression thoughtful. We should check the emergency supplies, she suggested eventually. If the power's out for long, we'll need more than just fire. Together they located candles, matches, and a battery-powered radio in the kitchen drawers. Their hands brushed again as they both reached for the same flashlight, but this time neither pulled away quite so quickly. I have food that will spoil, Without refrigeration, Olivia said. Perhaps we should share dinner tonight. Rafik looked at her for a long moment, the candlelight softening his features. I'd like that, he said finally. The storm raged on outside, but inside, something in the atmosphere had subtly shifted, the cold distance between them warming just enough to notice. Tides of change, the power outage stretched into its second day. Outside, the storm showed brief moments of reprieve before intensifying again, trapping them in their shared isolation. Their carefully constructed schedule had dissolved by necessity, the fireplace now their primary gathering point for warmth and light. Olivia stood at the kitchen counter chopping vegetables by candlelight. "Hand me that pot?" she asked, nodding toward the shelf Rafik could reach more easily. He passed it without comment, then resumed his task of opening canned beans with a manual can opener. They had fallen into an unexpected rhythm, moving around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease. "You never said what kind of research." "You do," Rafik remarked, breaking a comfortable silence. Olivia's knife paused mid-chop. "Marine conservation, specifically coral reef ecosystems." "That explains the waterproof notebooks in your bag." She shot him a look. "You went through my things?" "No," he said calmly. "They fell out when you were looking for batteries yesterday. I noticed the water-resistant pages." "Oh." Olivia resumed chopping. "Sorry for assuming. I've had colleagues steal my research before. The competitive world of coral reef studies." His tone carried a hint of teasing. "You'd be surprised." She slid the vegetables into the pot. "Especially when your findings contradict what powerful companies want to hear." Rafik added the beans. "Ah, you're that kind of scientist." "What kind?" "The inconvenient type, the ones who tell truths no one wants to face." There was something like respect in his voice. Olivia stirred the improvised stew. "Is that why you're really here? Hiding from inconvenient truths?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "In a manner of speaking, though perhaps I'm the inconvenient truth others are hiding from." His cryptic response intrigued her, but she didn't press. They ate their meal by firelight, the conversation shifting to safer topics, books they'd read, places they'd traveled. Rafik revealed he spoke 5 languages, while Olivia admitted she could identify over 200 species of coral by sight alone. Later, as they sat before the fire with mugs of tea, Olivia found herself studying Rafik's profile again. The firelight cast shadows that emphasized the angles of his face but also revealed lines of exhaustion she hadn't noticed before. "Your book," she ventured. "What's it about?" Rafik set down his mug. "It's complicated." "Try me." "I understand complicated." He seemed to weigh his words carefully. "It's about a man who built an empire on technology that changed the world, only to discover his creation was being used to harm the very people he wanted to help." "Fiction? Non-fiction?" He met her eyes directly. "Autobiography, actually." "Understanding." Dawned. "You're Rafik Nassar, founder of Privasphere, the privacy software company that had made headlines for refusing to sell user data to governments and corporations, ultimately leading to its controversial forced acquisition." He inclined his head slightly. "Former founder. I used your encryption software for my research data." Olivia shook her head. "The media said you disappeared after the takeover. I prefer strategic retreat." A wry smile touched his lips. "This book will be my response to what happened, if I can finish it before my former partners find legal grounds to silence me." "Is that why you're hiding in a lighthouse?" "Partly." His eyes held hers. "What about you, Dr. Nakamura? What drives a brilliant scientist to isolate herself during the most critical climate conference of the year?" Olivia flinched. "How did you—" "I recognized your name from the conference program. Your panel on ocean acidification was scheduled for yesterday." She stared into the fire. "My foundation pulled my research from presentation, said it needed further review. Code for your findings make our donors uncomfortable." What did your research show? That the timeline for catastrophic reef collapse is much shorter than previously modeled. That even with immediate intervention, we've likely passed several critical tipping points. Her voice cracked slightly. 3 years of data showing we're running out of time, and they shelved it because it's too alarming. Rafik was quiet for a moment. So we're both here hiding from the consequences of telling inconvenient truths. I'm not hiding, Olivia protested, then sighed. Okay, maybe I am. I just needed space to decide what to do next. And what will you do? I don't know. Release the data independently? Risk my career? Would anyone even listen? She hugged her, knees to her chest. What about you? Will your book make a difference? I don't know either. Rafik leaned forward, adding another log to the fire. But I have to try. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared purpose, despite their different worlds. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but contemplative, filled with unspoken understanding. A particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, drawing their attention to the storm outside. Rafik rose and peered through the glass. The sea is getting dangerously high, he observed. The road to the mainland must be completely flooded by now. Olivia joined him at the window. Their shoulders nearly touched as they watched waves crash against the cliffs below, the lighthouse beam sweeping rhythmically through the darkness. It's beautiful, in a terrifying way, she murmured. Nature often is. Rafik turned to look at her. His expression softened in the dim light. Like truth. Later, as they prepared to retire to their separate rooms, Rafik paused in the hallway. Olivia, he said, using her first name for the first time. Thank you for the conversation. It's been a long time since I've had one that mattered. Olivia felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Good night, Rafik. As she slipped into her cold bedroom, she realized their careful distance had been breached, not by physical proximity, but by something more profound. The storm that had forced them together had somehow created a space where truths could be spoken, where walls could begin to fall. Outside her window, the lighthouse beam swept across the tumultuous sea, steady and unwavering in the darkness. Weathering together, Olivia woke to the sound of something crashing. She bolted upright, momentarily, disoriented in the dim light of early dawn. Another crash followed, accompanied by Rafik's voice calling her name with urgency. She rushed from her room to find him in the kitchen, frantically moving supplies into a backpack. Water was seeping under the front door. The sea wall has partially collapsed, he explained, tossing her a raincoat. The lower road is already underwater and the water's rising quickly. We need to move to higher ground. Olivia's mind raced. The lighthouse? Yes. Grab whatever you can't leave behind, hurry. They moved with purposeful efficiency, Olivia securing her research laptop and notebooks in waterproof bags while Rafik gathered emergency supplies and his own manuscript. Within minutes, they were forcing the door open against howling wind and stinging rain. Outside, the situation was worse than Olivia had imagined. The normally safe distance between cottage and cliff edge had shrunk alarmingly, with sections of the garden already crumbling into the churning sea below. The path to the lighthouse, usually an easy 30-second walk, had become a treacherous journey through knee-deep rushing water and debris. "Stay close," Rafik shouted over the storm, reaching for her hand. His grip was strong, anchoring her against the wind that threatened to topple them both. They were halfway to the lighthouse when Olivia spotted movement near the collapsed seawall, a flash of fur struggling against the current. Without thinking, she pulled away from Rafik and waded toward it. "Olivia, what are you doing?" he called after her. She didn't answer, focused on reaching the small fox kit trapped against a fallen branch. The animal was exhausted, barely keeping its head above the rising water. Scooping it up, she cradled it inside her jacket, but as she turned back, a surge of water knocked her off balance. Suddenly, Rafik was there, his arm around her waist, steadying her. "I've got you," he said, his voice close to her ear. Together, they fought their way to the lighthouse door, Rafik shouldering it open against the wind. Inside, the ancient stone structure provided immediate relief from the howling storm. They climbed the spiral staircase, both dripping water with every step, until they reached the keeper's room just below the light chamber. Unlike the cottage, this space was utilitarian and dusty from disuse, but it was dry and secure. "Let me see," Rafik said, nodding toward Olivia's jacket where the fox kit was hidden. She carefully revealed the small creature, its rust-colored fur matted and its eyes wide with fear. "It's just a baby. The den must have been near the seawall." Rafik surprised her by immediately removing his sweater, creating a makeshift nest on a wooden bench. "Here, wrap it in this. It needs to get warm and dry." As Olivia tended to the fox, Rafik explored their temporary shelter, discovering emergency lanterns and, remarkably, a small propane heater with fuel. Soon, warmth began to radiate through the circular room. "Your quick thinking saved both of us," Olivia said, watching him organize their limited supplies. "Thank you. And your compassion saved that creature," he replied, nodding toward the fox kit now sleeping in its improvised bed. "We make a decent team, it seems." They changed into the dry clothes they'd managed to bring, turning their backs to each other, for privacy in the small space. Even this intimate arrangement felt somehow natural now, their former awkwardness replaced by a quiet trust. As day faded into evening, they sat side by side on a bench near the small heater, sharing a meal of protein bars and dried fruit from their emergency supplies. Through the windows, they could see their cottage below, its lower level now completely flooded. "Everything we left behind is probably ruined," Rafik observed. "At least we saved what matters." Olivia glanced at his laptop bag. "Your book is safe, as is your research." He studied her face in the lantern light. "You know, there's another option you haven't considered." "For what?" "Your data. Your foundation isn't the only channel for release." His eyes held hers. "My book has attracted considerable advance attention. A chapter featuring your suppressed research, with your consent of course, would guarantee it reaches the right audiences." Olivia stared at him. "You would do that?" "Our stories are not so different, Olivia. Both of us facing powerful interests that prefer comfortable lies to difficult truths." His hand found hers in the dim light. "Perhaps together our voices might be harder to silence." The unexpected offer left her speechless. For days, she had been agonizing over how to proceed, and now this man, a stranger just 3 days ago, was offering a solution she hadn't even considered. "Why would you risk complicating your already controversial book?" she asked. "Because it's the right thing to do." His thumb traced a gentle pattern on her palm. "And because I've come to care about what happens to you." The simple honesty of his words touched something deep within her. Without overthinking, she leaned forward and kissed him softly. His response was gentle but certain, his hand moving to cradle her face. When they broke apart, they remained close, foreheads touching. "I didn't come here looking for this," Olivia whispered. "Neither did I." Rafik's smile was tender. "But perhaps it found us anyway." A sudden cry interrupted the moment. The fox kit had awakened and was attempting to stand on wobbly legs. They both laughed, the tension broken, and moved to check on their small charge. As they worked together to feed the kit with water from a bottle cap, Olivia felt a profound sense of rightness. Here, in this lighthouse surrounded by chaos, she had found an unexpected clarity about her research, her future, and the man beside her who had somehow slipped past all her carefully constructed defenses. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but its power seemed diminished now. In this small, warm circle of light, something stronger had taken root. Something neither of them had been looking for, but both had apparently needed to find. The lighthouse beam swept rhythmically through the darkness above them, a steady pulse, like a heartbeat, guiding lost travelers home. Beyond the lighthouse. 3 days later, the storm finally released its grip on the coast. Olivia stood at the lighthouse balcony, watching as sunshine broke through dispersing clouds for the first time in nearly a week. Below, the floodwaters had begun to recede, revealing the muddy, debris-strewn path to what remained of the cottage. "Coast Guard says the road to the mainland should be passable by tomorrow morning," Rafik said, joining her. The fox kit, whom they'd named Storm, was curled contentedly in the crook of his arm, now significantly more energetic than when they'd rescued him. "So this is it, then," Olivia said softly. "Back to reality." Rafik's free hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, with the easy familiarity that had developed during their days in the lighthouse. A different reality, perhaps. They had spent those days in a curious bubble, isolated from the outside world yet more connected than either had been in years. Between caring for Storm, rationing their supplies, and the simple logistics of cohabiting, the small keeper's quarters, they had talked for hours. Real conversations about their work, their pasts, their hopes. Rafik had read passages from his manuscript to her. She had shown him the data models that her foundation had deemed too alarming to share. At night they had slept side by side on makeshift bedding, initially for warmth, but eventually because neither wanted to be apart. Their relationship had evolved with the natural rhythm of the lighthouse beam, steady, illuminating, revealing new dimensions with each passing hour. "I've been thinking about your offer," Olivia said, turning to face him, "to include my research in your book. And I want to do more than that." Determination colored her voice. "I want to collaborate with you, not just one chapter but a joint project. Your expertise in technology and privacy combined with my environmental data. We could create something that addresses both symptoms and causes." Rafik studied her face, his expression thoughtful. "That would mean spending considerable time together. Is that a problem?" A slow smile spread across his features. "Quite the opposite." He glanced down at Storm, who was attempting to climb up his sweater. "Though we might need more spacious accommodations than a lighthouse." Olivia laughed, gently rescuing the kit from his climbing expedition. "I was thinking my cabin in the San Juan Islands. It's remote enough for privacy but connected enough for research." "You're inviting me to your home? Is that too forward?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. Rafik set Storm down on his makeshift bed and turned back to her, taking both her hands in his. "Olivia, a week ago I came to this lighthouse seeking isolation, convinced that solitude was the only way forward. Now," he shook his head, seemingly amazed at his own transformation, "now I can't imagine continuing this journey alone." "Neither. Can I?" she admitted. "It's strange, isn't it? How being forced together could lead to this. Perhaps not so strange." His gaze was warm. "Sometimes we build walls that need breaking down. We needed a storm." The next morning, they packed their few salvageable belongings from the cottage. Most of it was water damaged beyond repair, but Olivia found herself oddly unbothered by the loss. What they were taking with them mattered far more than what they were leaving behind. They had arranged for a wildlife rehabilitator to meet them on the mainland to take Storm, a bittersweet necessity they both understood. As they prepared to leave, Olivia took one last look at the lighthouse that had been their sanctuary. "We should come back someday," she said, "when it's restored." "We will," Rafik promised, his arm slipping around her waist. "Though perhaps we'll check the weather forecast more carefully next time." The coastal road was still partially flooded but passable. As they drove away, the lighthouse grew smaller in the rearview mirror, standing tall against the clearing sky. Olivia reached across the console to take Rafik's hand. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," she began. "About needing a storm to break down walls, yes? I've spent years studying how ecosystems respond to disruption. Sometimes destruction is followed by renewal, different, but often stronger than before." She squeezed his hand. "What happened in that lighthouse? It wasn't just about finding each other. It was about finding new versions of ourselves." Rafik nodded, understanding in his eyes. "In my industry, we have a term for when systems are forced to evolve through challenge, constructive disruption. It's often uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but ultimately necessary for growth." "Is that what we experienced? Constructive disruption?" "I believe so." He smiled. though most technical disruptions don't involve quite so much kissing. Olivia laughed, the sound bright and free. Ahead of them, the road curved toward a future neither had anticipated a week ago. There would be challenges, her foundation's resistance to her findings, his former partner's attempts to discredit his work, the logistical complexities of merging two independent lives. But those obstacles seemed manageable now, shared between them. At the Wildlife Center, they said goodbye to Storm, who had already begun bonding with his rehabilitator. "He'll be released back into the wild once he's ready," the specialist assured them. "You saved his life by bringing him to us." "He saved us too, in a way," Olivia replied, stroking the kit's fur one last time. As they walked back to the car, Rafik took her hand again. "Where to now, Dr. Nakamura? Your island cabin, or do we have stops to make first?" Olivia considered the question. A week ago, her world had felt constrained by institutional barriers and professional disappointments. Now, possibilities stretched before her like an open sea. "First, we publish our research, all of it, without compromise," she said decisively. "Then we begin the joint project. As for where—" She looked up at him, at this man who had moved from stranger to essential in the span of a storm. "I think home is wherever we decide to create it together." Rafik's smile was all the answer she needed. As they drove toward the setting sun, Olivia reflected on the curious path that had brought them here. A booking error, a storm, a lighthouse, random elements that had somehow aligned to create something precious and unexpected. Some might call it coincidence. Others perhaps would call it destiny. Olivia simply called it the beginning.